So how do we look at reasonable accommodation? We look at the intention. It's like we should be looking at the intention of inclusion and the labor law. Don't look at the nuts and bolts and nitty-gritties. Look at what is the intention and start to apply some logic. The aim is to minimize the impact of the impairment in the person's ability to perform the essential functions of a job. Okay, so let's just say, and I'm going to go back to using that example of shift work. Okay, let's say we've got somebody who is able to come to work for the day shift and sort of the early evening shift because they're mobility impaired and they rely on the transport of others. So they can get lifts to and from work in the morning and in the afternoon, but they can't do the midnight shift because they can't get mobility. Is it reasonable to say, well, we'll put that person on the first 2 shifts of the 8-hour shift roster and not on the last one? Well, in some situations, it might be completely doable because you've got 12 people that work on that shift as well. And if they're doing the day and the afternoon shift, they're doing the same number of shifts as everybody else. And those people that have to pick up an extra night shift, it's not actually going to inconvenience anyone dramatically or operationally. However, if there were only 4 people doing those shifts, it would not be reasonable or it would not be feasible or fair, because what happens is the other 3 people would land up doing a significant number of extra night shifts. So how do we mitigate that? What we do is we look at other solutions. Okay, so if transport is an issue, what about if we put you on the same shifts as somebody that lived nearby that could give you a lift to and from? So start to explore other ways of doing it, because very often there is a solution. So what does it require? You must remember what you're trying to do is you're trying to minimize the disabling factor. So nobody is asking you to do special treatment. What people are asking you to do is equalizing treatment. And I always explain reasonable accommodation like this. Here is somebody without a disability. Here is somebody with a disability. And this gap here is the disabling factor. Reasonable accommodation is designed to do this so that performance can be judged or delivered like this. Okay, so essentially, you don't have to drop your standards of performance, but how somebody achieves that performance is going to be flexed on. All right. And I think that that's where people get very confused. They decide what is reasonable based on what they believe is going to be a special needs treatment rather than equalizing needs treatment. Okay. And if the conversation comes down to this and you go, well, we've explored every option with you, in conversation with you, we cannot find a way to enable you to perform the key requirements of the job that is going to allow you to perform like everybody else, then you don't need to put that person in that role. Okay, I'm a wheelchair user. If I was going to apply for a scaffolding position, a welding position, clearly there's no ways you can accommodate me because you have to climb over things and get around. So you've got to pick up a heavy machine. A key requirement of the job is physical strength, mobility, and stamina. Okay, and I don't have any of those, although mental stamina I got in droves. Okay, so I'm not going to be applying for that job. What you're not allowed to do is decide what disability matches what role, because you don't know an individual's circumstances, so you don't necessarily know what's disabling them. What you can do is you can say the inherent requirement of the job is that they've got to be able to work in a physically demanding role with lots of mobility, and this is a regular and it's a key requirement of the job. So key requirement of the job from a functional perspective is mobility and movement. Okay, the applicants that apply need to be able to have those key requirements. But if I take it away from mobility, and let's just say I put it down to somebody who's completely deaf, a key requirement of the job is communication in this role. You cannot say, well, we won't have anybody who's deaf apply because they can't communicate, because you don't know that. We've got applicants who communicate very well. They speak in English, they lip read in English, they have a matric, they've got good customer service, they've been in the tourism industry for a while. So what is going to be your adjustment or your reasonable accommodation is that they're going to have a voice note on the phone saying, please could you WhatsApp or email me any queries that you might have. You have a sign there that they might be able to use if they want to, depending on the individual, saying, I am deaf, so please look at me when I'm communicating with you. You do general awareness and awareness training and etiquette training with the colleagues so that their colleagues know how to, you don't get people going, hello, my name is Lesa, because they think that's how you're supposed to do conversations with people who lip read. Meantime, the person's going, I don't know what's happening with this individual's face. Okay, so it comes down to the way we deliver the work. Is it, what do we need to be flexible on? What do we need to look at? What are we measuring? We're always measuring whether it minimizes the disabling factor so that that person can add value to our business and to this role, and we can add value in return. But we've given an equal playing field upon which people can compete. Okay, so what does it need? It needs flexible thinking. It needs common sense. We had a big argument the other day with a client because they were going, well, we're a 3-story building and it is not reasonable to put a lift in to allow access for somebody to get up to the accounts department and work there. And I was going, well, A, it's amazing how many of these new buildings are going up that have a place for a lift in the architectural designs, and that's how the plans got passed, but nobody's actually put the lift in. But B, what about if you swap an upstairs office with a downstairs office? Oh, you can't do that because all the accounts people are upstairs. And I'm like, yes, but why do they need to be in the local vicinity? Why can't they be downstairs or work from home? Because with MS Teams and with the telephones and with WhatsApps and with emails, they've got a multitude of ways to talk to colleagues when they need. You know, so why do they need to be in that environment? Okay, so what do we need? A bit of common sense and logic, okay? We need the right motivation. And again, I think COVID showed us that very often a lack of flexibility comes down to A, I didn't think about that before. So, well, you know, a conversation is a great way to know what you don't know. But secondly, motivation. Don't just say no before you've thought about it. Okay. The last point is budget. Now, I will tell you that there is going to require a degree of budget to reasonably accommodate or make workplace adjustments as you go. No, it's not as big as you think, but I am of the opinion that says every organization should have a budget that is a reasonable accommodation or workplace adjustment budget, and it is there that you can draw from. So very often we have a great candidate for a role and we're about to place them, but then the line manager is going, well, we don't have budget in our department to buy this assistive technology. And HR going, well, it must come from the department's budget, not from the HR budget. Okay, take that argument off the table. Budget from a broader perspective to have a disability or diversity inclusion budget, okay? A reasonable accommodation budget, a workplace adjustment budget. If you have that, it takes a lot of arguments off the table. What I do also want to tell you is that when you go and you invest in that larger screen, for example, or that wheelchair access for an individual to be able to get in the building, remember, even when that person leaves your company, you still have that inclusive and accessible technology or design or infrastructure or policy in place that will benefit everybody ultimately. Okay. And I think that is a very, you know, for me as a business owner, when I'm going to go and see a company as a potential supplier to my business, and I go and visit one and they take me through the back entrance, down a long passage, they take me up the suicide ramp, then they've got to go and find keys on how to open the back door so that I can get into the office, versus going to see another supplier that is a competitor to them, but they've got an accessible office that I can get into and get around. I'm telling you, I'll negotiate rather with the accessible supplier and say, listen, your price is a bit higher, loving the fact that you're inclusive, you speak our language, let's talk about how we can adjust things to fit the budget because I want to be able to support you. That's what happens in business. So it's just smart business to think inclusively on how you deliver your products and your services.